These are your notes for Unit 7, Day 2 of Algebra 1. If you would like to see the warm-up, the review question, or any homework questions we covered in class today, just look at the finished notes. So today, we are going to learn how to factor trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. We will learn a couple different methods for doing this, and then we're also going to learn how to factor out a GCF first and then factor the remaining trinomial. All right, so factoring trinomials when it's x squared plus bx plus c. So let's review how to multiply them. So if I have x plus 4 times x plus 3, remember we had two different ways of multiplying this. We could either distribute or use the box. So we have x plus 4 and x plus 3. So if we multiplied this, I would get x squared plus 4x plus 3x plus 12. And then when you combine those two middle terms, you get x squared plus 7x plus 12. That was option 1. Or you could have distributed x times x is x squared, x times 3 is 3x, 4 times x is 4x, and 4 times 3 is 12, which would have given you those terms in the box. And when you combine like terms, you get x squared plus 7x plus 12. So what we want to do now is we want to take this expression, x squared plus 7x plus 12, and we want to put it back into the parentheses. So I want to put this back into two parentheses. So I want to know what times what would give me x squared plus 7x plus 12. We've got a couple different ways you can think about this. One, you can try and remake the box. So when you remake the box, we know that that first term is going to go in the first box, and we know the last term is going to go in the last box. So what you have to do is you have to figure out what goes in those other two boxes. Well, to get that first box, I need x times x. And I know when I add these two boxes together, I need to get that middle term. So I know when I add those two boxes together, I need to get 7x. So what needs to happen is I need to find two numbers that when I multiply them together, I get 12. So I need two numbers. When I multiply them together, I get 12. And then when I add them together, I get 7. So we can do this little graphic organizer. So what are the factors of 12? So what times what is going to multiply to 12 but add to 7? Well, what two numbers multiply to 12 and add to 7? That would be positive 3 and positive 4. So I need a plus 3 and a plus 4 to make that work, because then I would get the 3x and the 4x, and they would add to 7x, and then 3 times 4 is 12. So I need x plus 3 and x plus 4. So you can think about it in terms of figuring out what would have made the box to make this accurate. Or another way of thinking about them is if you started with x squared plus 7x plus 12, and you want to break it back up into its parentheses or factor it, you've got numbers, right? So we've got x squared, and then that term is called bx, and then that term is called c. What we're trying to do is we need to find two numbers that multiply to give us the c term and add to give us the b term. So that's what's going to end up happening. So we need two numbers. When we multiply them, we get the c term, and when we add them, we get the b term. The c term is going to be the constant at the end, and the b term is that middle term with x. So what multiplies to 12 and adds to 7? That would be 3 and 4. And I need positive 12 and positive 7, so I want plus 3 and plus 4. And then remember, I need x squared, and x times x is x squared. So I would get x plus 3 times x plus 4. All right, let's look at that second example, x minus 5 times x plus 3. So if I were to multiply this out, we could multiply it out with the box. We have x minus 5 times x plus 3. So we would get x squared minus 5x plus 3x and minus 15 If you combine like terms, you get x squared minus 2x minus 15. All right, so now my objective is to take x squared minus 2x minus 15, and I want to take that and break it back up into the parentheses. So I want to figure out what two parentheses created that. So you can think about it as redoing the box. So I know that I need x squared in my first box. I need negative 15 in that last box. So I know I need an x and an x to make the x squared. I know when I add up those two middle boxes, I need to get negative 2x. So I need to think what two numbers would multiply and give me negative 15 and add to give me negative 2. So what numbers multiply to negative 15 and add to negative 2? That would be negative 5 and positive 3. So I need a negative 5 and a positive 3. So this would be negative 5x, this would be positive 3x. And it works out. So I need x minus 5 and x plus 3. Or if you looked at the original problem, x squared minus 2x minus 15, I need to find two numbers that multiply to c and add to b. So I want two numbers. When I multiply them, I get negative 15. And when I add them, I get negative 2. So that would be negative 5 and positive 3 like we just said. And so this would break down into x minus 5 and x plus 3. So whatever method you like the best or whatever one makes the most sense in your mind, you can use that method. And so that's going to be factoring trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. So let's look at some more. So we have y squared plus 14y plus 45. So if we thought about it with the box, we know that the first box is y squared. We know the last box is positive 45. So I know I need y and y. When I add up the two middle boxes, or those two diagonal boxes, I need to get 14y. So I need two numbers. When I multiply them together, I get 45. And when I add them together, I get 14. So multiply to 45 and add to 14. So what times what is 45, but when I add them together, I get 14? Well, positive 9 and positive 5. 9 times 5 is 45. 9 plus 5 is 14. So I need a positive 9 and a positive 5. And then I would get 9y and 5y, which would be 14y. So this is going to be y plus 9 times y plus 5. And that would be the factored form of that trinomial. If I multiplied those two parentheses back out, I would get the original problem. All right, for number 2, m squared minus 10m plus 16. Let's do the other method. So I need two numbers. When I multiply them, I get c, and when I add them, I get b. So what times what is 16, but when I add those two numbers, I get negative 10. So multiply to positive 16 and add to negative 10. That would be negative 8 and negative 2. Negative 8 times negative 2 is positive 16. Negative 8 plus negative 2 is negative 10. So when I go to factor this, I get m minus 8 and m minus 2. All right, x squared minus 1x minus 30. So let's do the box method again. So I know the first two terms multiply to x squared. The last two terms multiply to negative 30. And then when I combine those two diagonal boxes, I get negative 1x. So I know I need an x and an x. And then I need two numbers. When I multiply them, I get negative 30. And when I add them, I get negative 1. So what two numbers add together to get negative 1, but when you multiply them together, you get negative 30? That would be negative 6 and positive 5. So I need a negative 6 and a positive 5, and I would get positive 5x and negative 6x, which would give me the original problem. So this would factor into x minus 6 times x plus 5. All right. Let's look at these ones. Z squared plus that should be an x. So x squared plus 13x plus 42. So what multiplies to 42 and adds to 13? So what times what is 42, but when you add it together, you get 13? Well, that would be 6 times 7. So this will be x plus 6 times x plus 7. If you multiplied that back out, you would get x squared plus 13x plus 42. All right, on the next one, b squared minus 13b plus 22. So I need two numbers. When I multiply them together, I get positive 22. And when I add them together, I get negative 13. Well, that would be 2 and 11, or negative 2 and negative 11. So this would be b minus 2 and b minus 11. If I multiplied that back out, I would get b squared minus 13b plus 22. On the next one, x squared plus 6x plus 10. I need two numbers. When I multiply them, I get 10, and when I add them together, I get 6. Well, the factors of 10 are 1 times 10 and 2 times 5. Neither of those will add together to get 6, so this is not factorable. So you can't factor it any further. That's going to be the expression. X squared plus 6x plus 10 is already factored. You can't do anything more to it. All right. What about on the next one? X squared plus 8xy plus 12y squared. So on this one, let's make our box again. And I know that that first box is x squared. I know that this last box is 12y squared. So I know I need an x and an x, but then I need a 12y squared. Well, to get the y squared, I know I need a y and a y. So now I need two numbers that multiply to 12 and add to 8. So what multiplies to 12 and adds to 8? That would be 6 and 2. So I need a positive 6 and a positive 2. So this box would become positive 6xy. That box would become 2xy. And it works. So the two parentheses I need are x plus 6y and x plus 2y. All right, why don't you pause the video and try number 2, a squared minus 2ab minus 35b squared. Try and factor that one. All right, let's try the box again. So we have an a squared and a negative 35b squared. So I know I need an a and a b, and then I need a b and a b, an a and a b and a b to get the a squared and the b squared. And now I need two numbers. When I multiply them, I get negative 35, and when I add them, I get negative 2. Well, that would be negative 7 and positive 5. And so if I multiply these out, I get negative 7ab and positive 5ab, and it would work. So my two parentheses are going to be a minus 7b and a plus 5b. All right, 32 minus 16x plus x squared. So we're going to put these in descending order first. So remember, descending order means from the highest exponent to the lowest exponent. So this is going to be x squared minus 16x, and then that 32 is positive, so plus 32. So that'll be x squared minus 16x plus 32. All right, and now we want to factor this. So we need two numbers. When you multiply them, you get positive 32, and when you add them, you get negative 16. Well, the factors of 32 are 8 and 4. Those wouldn't add up to 16. We get 1 and 32. Those wouldn't add up to 16. And we get 2 and 16. Those wouldn't add up to 16. So it looks like this isn't factorable. So not factorable, or it's already factored. So that's as far as it could go. And then we've got negative 56 minus y squared. So rewrite it first. Y squared minus y minus 56. So we'll try the box method. So we know we need a y squared and a negative 56. So we want a y and a y. And then these two middle diagonals need to combine to negative 1y. So what multiplies to negative 56 and adds to negative 1? Well, that would be negative 8 and positive 7. So negative 8 and positive 7, we would get positive 7y and negative 8y, and that would work. So this is going to be y minus 8 and y plus 7. All right. What if you look at the three terms and you notice that you can factor out the greatest common factor like we were doing last class? So we have 2x squared minus 16x minus 20. All three of those terms have a 2 in common, so we can factor out the greatest common factor of 2 first. And if you factored that out, then you would be left with x squared minus 8x and then minus 10. Then, after you factor out the GCF, you look at that remaining trinomial and you say, okay, can that factor? Well, that 2 is going to stay out in front, and then we want to know, will it factor further? So can you multiply to negative 10 and add to negative 8? Do two numbers multiply to negative 10 and add to negative 8? Well, we have negative 5, positive 2, negative 10, positive 1. So no, it doesn't factor any further. So this is as far as this one would go. 2 times x squared minus 8x minus 10. Let's look at the next one. 4a squared minus 24a plus 36. 4, 24, and 36, all of those are divisible by 4, so they have a greatest common factor of 4. And I'd be left with a squared minus 6a plus 9. Can we multiply to positive 9 and add to negative 6? So something times something is positive 9, and when I add those, I get negative 6. It would be negative 3 and negative 3. So it would be 4 and then a minus 3 and a minus 3. If you wanted to, you could write that as 4 times a minus 3 squared. On the next one, we have 5y to the fourth minus 10y to the third minus 40y squared. All of them are divisible by 5 and a y squared because they all have at least a y squared in common. So if I factor that out, I'm left with y squared minus 2y minus 8. And then you think, for that trinomial, can you multiply to negative 8 and add to negative 2? You can. So the 5y squared stays on the outside. And then we have y and y. And then negative 4 times positive 2 is negative 8. And negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2. And so that would be the completely factored form for that. All right, your homework is from 7.0.